Hello everyone and welcome to Module 1 of the Buddhist Scriptures section of this area of study. Unfortunately I am again sick while recording a module.
You've got to get yourself together.
I've been told this substantially increases your own feelings of sickness, students. They were complaining on the bus on Sunday that I make them feel sick.
Well, yes, my kids thought they were getting infected through the
so
stream.
I can promise you that science shows us that infection cannot be carried through YouTube videos. So you can rest safe.
Good.
Okay, this is quite an interesting text. Very short, but got lots of important stuff. The key point I wanted to make about the background is that the key idea here, and it's in the title, the doctrine of not-self, is a key Buddhist belief, and that from my understanding, this is actually a really, really important text just generally within the Buddhist... what do you call it? Because the monk on Sunday was saying that it's not a religion.
Right, philosophy.
That? Yeah, maybe the Buddhist philosophy.
Or way of life.
Yeah, Buddhist way of life. This is actually a really, really important text to that. So I think that's pretty cool that we're getting to look at something.
But also, remember the monk, we're referring to the monk who spoke at the forum.
On Sunday, yep.
He also said that this is a late text in Buddhism, so it doesn't directly derive from the writings of Buddha, if there are such a thing. Yeah. So it's like, it's kind of one person's interpretation of the key tenets of Buddhism, which may or may not be completely accurate, but it seems to mostly be accurate.
Cool.
So here are some pictures of King Milinda and the Venerable Nagasena. Nagasena, maybe. On the left we've got the king. Now, I wanted to get this... right in terms of the geography, but if you read the first part of the text, which is the heading is the questions of King Milinda, that's where you get kind of just basically setting the scene. Yeah. And it talks about all these places that you may have never heard of. I certainly hadn't. It says in the land of the Bactrian Greeks, which from my understanding is modern day Afghanistan. So like if you Google up a map of the world, look where Afghanistan is, that could help you just get a bit of a visual. It also, later in the text, it references the Himalayas, which is obviously a mountain range kind of, is it between India and Nepal? Okay, yes. So anyway, it's that area of the world. So the King Milinda was, I'm not sure if it's actually historically accurate, probably not, but... in the story, he's a very successful kind of famous king in that area, modern-day Afghanistan. But I think, so I guess I feel like I'm probably massacring history as we speak, but I suppose that area of the world was inhabited by Greeks at that time, because it says in the land of the Bactrian Greeks. And he does look Greek in this picture, doesn't he? Anyway, you're not going to be examined on that, but I'm just trying to paint the picture. Anyway, so that's Milinda, and then Nagasena is, I suppose, a very enlightened Buddhist monk who comes from another place. I'm not quite sure where. And anyway, you can read it yourselves, but in that first little section of the text, it talks about what happens. So somehow... Nagasena is kind of summoned to Milinda to answer some questions that he has. And it's kind of a bit of a battle between these two very respected leaders as to who's going to outsmart each other in the questions.
Okay, so the real guts of the text really starts at the top of paragraph 2a. And here we've got the first thread of conversation. So this is the first little set of speech bubbles that are in your course notes. So it might be helpful to have these out with you as you go through and be adding some notes to them as well. So this point that's being made here is King Milinda's question is, how is your reverence known?
So your reverence is Nagasena. That's just his title. Yeah.
And Nagasena responds what he says here, but the most key part, I guess, is towards the end where he says, for no real person can hear... be apprehended.
So he's saying, I'm known as Nagasena.
Yeah.
But this word is just a denomination.
Yeah.
And he actually goes through all these synonyms of denomination, like an appellation
Yep.
a designation, a mere name.
Yeah, I think designation's a good one.
Okay.
And that comes up a bit in the textbook.
Yep.
So kind of, it means like if you're designating something, you're giving something to something else. And I guess in this case, he's saying you're designating a title or a name to a particular thing.
So we're giving that thing that we see the name Nagasena.
Yep.
But his actual point is that...
And this is his key conclusion for his column.
no personal identity.
Yeah.
Very Hume-like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is the fundamental question that King Milinda is kind of asking in the questions of King Milinda. Like, what is your identity?
Yeah.
And Nagasena denies that he has one.
Yeah. Okay, so here we've got a key Buddhist belief that's going to be quite important to this text, and they're called skandhas. Okay, and basically these are the 5 key things that constitute a sentient being. So that's kind of like a thinking, conscious being.
Yeah, if you're sentient, you can have thoughts and perceptions and stuff like that.
Okay, great. And so these 5 things are what makes that up. So first we have form, which is kind of the physical aspects or the bodily aspects.
Yep.
And then we've got feeling,
According
perceptions,
to-
impulses, and consciousness. Now, let's quickly give a bit of meaning to each of these. What have you got here,
My
Misfits?
good friend Wikipedia is telling me the answers to these. So as we said, form is physical, like matter.
Yep.
Feeling means sensing an object as either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. So like how you feel about something.
That was not me. That was our housemate. But keep going.
We should introduce Fabio to
Yeah,
the
it's
world.
getting weird.
Okay, sorry. Perceptions refers to like what you experience with your senses. So shape, sound, sight, smell, whatever. Impulses is all types of mental habits, thoughts, ideas, opinions, prejudices, compulsions, and decisions. And consciousness means, being able to... Well, I guess we can just define consciousness as what we've already defined
so being
it
aware
as.
of yourself.
Yep.
Cool.
So according to Buddhism,
Yes.
as we're going to find out, that in Buddhism they don't think that there's any such thing as a personal identity.
Yeah.
But they do believe there are these 5 kind of general things,
Yeah.
which if you put them together, we can recognise it as a being.
Great. Okay, so we're now moving on to another thread of their conversation. So Nagasena has said that Nagasena is just a name that he's been given. It's a designation. So King Milinda now goes, well, if you cannot be apprehended as a person or a thing, then who then guards morality, practices meditation, which is a key Buddhist belief that leads to enlightenment and nirvana. If there is no person, there could be no merit and no demerit. So again, more moral concepts, and no reward or punishment.
So here, like in that first dot point on the left, Milinda is trying to challenge Nagasena's assertion that there is no personal identity. He's saying, if there is no personal identity, then how can you attribute moral blame? Like, if you do something wrong, how can I say, Tim, you have done that deed?
Yeah, and so that's the question that's in the second thread of the conversation, and it's to do with moral agency. And at this point, and what you should put in as Nagasena's response, he kind of just goes no and brushes over it. He's going to come back and address it, but he does kind of brush over it at this point.
Actually, at the very end of the text, he comes back and says how we can still have moral guilt, even though there's no personal identity.
Yeah, exactly. So what you could say here is that in this thread of your course notes, you could say that it's the that he responds to it in the 5th thread, which is to do with karma.
Okay.
So then this bottom question is then King Milinda keeps questioning him and going, well, what then is this Nagasena? So this 3rd thread is all about, well, what are you then?
So, Milinda has tried to kind of trip him up and say, well, you must have an identity because of this moral stuff.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of following on and saying, so let's decide, what is your personal identity?
Yeah.
Is it the hairs on your head?
Yeah. So King Milinda's now going to go on this big rant. And he includes all these other ideas of form, basically. So this is one of the skandhas. Okay, so and he lists a whole heap. But
this
stuff
is
like
only
muscles,
a small
sinews.
segment of what he lists.
So this is at the top of one of the I think, the third page in the reader. Okay? And so he lists all these things to do with form, and Nagasena says, no, that's not me.
So, no, as you'll see, in this conversation as we keep going, Milinda keeps suggesting something that the personal identity might be, and Nagasena keeps denying that that is the personal identity. And Milinda goes through all the different skandhas, so here he's on form, and Nagasena keeps denying that that's his identity.
So here are these other skandhas, so feeling, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. And to all of them, Nagasena says no.
That's not my
That's not me.
Identity.
So in your course notes in this thread, this is kind of King Milinda's big question to him: are you any of these things? Nagasena says no, I'm not any of these things. And to fully answer it, he puts forward the very famous analogy from this text, which is the chariot analogy.
So here, King Milinda comes back with another idea of what Nagasena's personal identity could be. His new idea is that the personal identity could be a combination of those 5 skandhas.
Yep.
And I think, Tim, what he means here is a fixed combination. So, when I look at you, you've got certain form, feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. Those exact things are what make your personal identity.
Yeah.
And Nagasena goes, no, it's not a fixed combination of those things. And then one of Milinda's final ideas is, okay, well, maybe your personal identity is somewhere outside the fixed combination of those things. But again, Nagasena says, no, great king, that is not my personal identity. So here, Milinda thinks he's won against this great Nagasena. He thinks he's outsmarted him. He says, ask as I may, I can discover no Nagasena at all. Your reverence has told a lie, has spoken a falsehood. There really is no Nagasena. So I find this a bit odd, and I think it's a bit of an inconsistency in the text, kind of, because Nagasena actually began by saying, I have no personal identity. And here, Milinda seems to be assuming that he's begun by saying he has got a personal identity.
Okay.
You know what I mean? He's kind of accusing him of contradicting himself. But actually, I think Milinda is accusing him of contradicting himself simply by giving his name Nagasena. He's kind of saying the name implies a personal identity behind that name, and you're saying there's no personal identity, therefore you've told a lie.
Yeah, well, I think the monk on Sunday kept referring to the fact that King Milinda constantly makes that
assumption.
Error. Yeah, a false assumption that he constantly goes on about an I or a who or a...
Yeah, didn't he use the word predicated, which is one of the words I've recently discussed with my lovely students. Is that Milinda's whole argument is predicated on the assumption that there is personal identity, which Nagasena is denying. Yeah. So Nagasena here, as you can see, the little pictures at the bottom have swapped. Isn't that clever? Because now Milinda's not doing the questioning anymore. Nagasena's doing the questioning.
This is still, though, in your third thread of the course notes. And this is Nagasena's. Ultimately, even though he's questioning Milinda, this is all Nagasena's reply to King Milinda.
Yep, so this is where Nagasena comes in and kind of... he uses an analogy to show that Milinda's attempt to own him was flawed. Yeah. And the analogy is an analogy of the chariot. So Nagasena says, oh, you're a great king. How did you come here today? Did you walk? No, that would have been too horrible for a great king like you. You must have come on a mount, as in a chariot. And Milinda says, yeah, I did come on a chariot.
And now Nagasena is going to do a very similar process to that of King Milinda, in that he's going to go through all the different kind of parts of the chariot. He's making a similar point. So he's going, so what is a chariot? Is this pole the chariot? And
as in, remember when Milinda started by saying, are the hairs of your head Nagasena?
Yes, exactly.
So, the pole of the chariot is kind of like the hairs of the head. It's one physical part. And Milinda says, well, no, of course the pole is not the identity of the chariot.
Yeah. And then we've got here a whole nother parts of, I guess, the form of the chariot, the physical parts.
So remember when Milinda was going, is the muscle, the sinew, the
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. He goes on about snot and
Yeah.
horrible things.
And again, King Milinda goes, well, clearly no, that they're not all the chariot.
So again, Nagasena's drawing back to what Milinda previously said, and he asks, is it the combination of all those things which is the chariot? And Milinda says no. Can I just note something, again, weird about the text?
Yep.
Don't you find it weird that Milinda is denying these things, whereas previously he was trying to say that Nagasena's personal identity was one of these things? You know what I mean? It seems to be kind of against his beliefs.
Yeah, but ultimately the text has been designed to
Make a certain
prove,
point.
prove Nagasena's
Yeah,
point.
so it's a bit artificial the way it's constructed.
And again, like with King Milinda's accusations of what Nagasena is, Nagasena suggests that the chariot is outside the combination, and Milinda again replies no.
So here is kind of where Nagasena's analogy culminates, and he makes the same accusation of Milinda as Milinda originally made of him. He says, well, obviously you've spoken a lie, you've told me a falsehood, you've said there was a chariot that you came on, but there really is no chariot. We can't find it in any of these 5 skandhas. So clearly the chariot has no personal identity, just like I have no personal identity.
So here he's saying, I haven't done a falsehood, I haven't lied, and I'm right to give this thing a name because I'm acting independence, so I'm relying on the fact that all these parts are there, and that leads me to give them a denomination or this designation to this chariot.
Yeah, even though the chariot isn't any of those things in particular.
Yeah.
The fact that they're kind
I'm
of all there.
Yeah, I'm acting independence, so relying on all of them being
I'm
there.
going to just give it this name just for the sake of it.
So here Nagasena is going, yeah, you're right. Look, in dependence of all my parts of my body and my 5 skandhas being here, people do the same thing. And they give me this denomination of Nagasena. But as I've shown by the fact that none of those actual things are Nagasena, and none of those things in combination are Nagasena, and none of those things beyond the combination are Nagasena.
Yeah.
It is just something
that we do for convenience.
That is, yes, so it's by convention. Yeah.
Yeah, so the monk, again on Sunday, was saying, even the monk uses, like, the word I.
Yeah.
So I do this, I do that. People were accusing him of, like, contradicting the doctrine of not self by using the term I. And he was saying, no, it's just conventional speech. It's just, I just do it for convenience so I don't have to grunt at you.
Yeah.
Cool. And same thing with Nagasena.
Yeah.
There's no Nagasena, but we just give it the term Nagasena because all those things are there.
But in ultimate reality, that person cannot be apprehended. So he's coming back to the point that he makes at the very start as well.
See you next time.